Which would be worse? To live as a monster, or to die as a good man?
What if I told you that your brain, right now, at this exact moment, is actively lying to you?
Oh, it absolutely is. Every single day.
Right. Like, it is perfectly capable of editing physical objects right out of your field of vision simply to protect you from a truth you just can't handle.
Which sounds completely like science fiction.
It totally does. But it happens. Your mind has these mental blind spots. And if reality gets too painful, your subconscious will literally rewrite the script of your life.
It'll alter your memories.
Yes, it will build an entirely new identity from the ground up, just so you can survive the day.
Because it is the ultimate defense mechanism, you know? We like to think of our perception as this flawless video recording of the world.
The perfect one-to-one copy.
Exactly. But it's not. It's an active, real-time negotiation between what is actually happening and what our ego can safely process.
And when those two things severely clash.
The brain doesn't just bend reality, it breaks it.
And that terrifying, totally unpredictable psychological landscape is exactly where we are setting up camp today. So, welcome to the deep dive.
We are so thrilled to have you with us.
We really are, because today we are completely deconstructing a masterpiece. We are unpacking the incredibly dense, meticulously crafted psychological architecture of Martin Scorsese's thriller, Shutter Island.
Which is just a brilliant piece of filmmaking.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Now, you might be thinking, oh, it's that movie with the crazy twist ending. But our mission today is to completely blow that conception out of the water.
We really are.
We're going to prove that this isn't a film relying on some cheap shock in the third act. It is a structural marvel where the ultimate truth isn't hidden behind a curtain.
No, it's explicitly, brazenly hidden in plain sight from the very first frame.
That is the true brilliance of the craftsmanship we're examining today. The audience is handed every single piece of the puzzle right out of the gate.
We, alongside the main character, are manipulated into assembling it incorrectly.
Totally.
The architecture of the deception relies entirely on our own psychological blind spots.
And that manipulation is exactly what we are going to dissect. So here is how we are going to do it. I'm going to act as your guide through the physical landscape of this story.
Setting the scene.
Exactly. I will be pointing out all the hidden Easter eggs, the bizarre physical anomalies, and the subtle visual glitches scattered throughout the narrative.
And I'll be synthesizing all those clues. We are going to unpack the underlying logic, the deep psychiatric history, and the mechanics of trauma that make this entire illusion work.
I am so ready for this. Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start at the very beginning.
The year is 1954.
Right, 1954. We open on a ferry boat, emerging from this incredibly thick, oppressive fog. We meet our main character, U.S. Marshal Teddy Daniels.
Played by Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yes, and the very first thing we notice about this tough, seasoned federal agent is that he is horribly, violently seasick.
Just completely incapacitated by it.
He is bent over a toilet. He can barely stomach the movement of the water. He's splashing cold water on his face, just trying to hold it together.
He's struggling.
He finally wipes his face, steps out onto the deck, and he meets his new partner, Chuck, for the very first time.
Let's just pause right there and look at the sheer logistics of that moment.
Okay, let's go.
Because if we analyze the mechanics of that interaction, the entire foundation of the story immediately cracks.
Right, because if you think about it for more than 2 seconds, it makes absolutely zero logical sense.
None at all.
Why is Teddy just meeting his partner now on the deck of a boat in the middle of the ocean?
They are heading to Ashcliffe, right? A highly secure, isolated psychiatric hospital for the criminally insane.
Exactly. This is a massive federal investigation. Wouldn't 2 U.S. Marshals meet at the regional office in Boston?
You'd think so.
Wouldn't they brief each other, review case files, get to know each other before getting on a highly restricted transport ferry?
The timeline of their introduction is completely fractured.
It's fractured because it's operating on dream logic.
Yes. Think about how a dream works when you're sleeping. You never remember walking through the door or arriving at the destination.
You just suddenly are in a situation.
Right. The preamble is missing. In the real world, strict logistical protocols exist, especially for federal law enforcement in the 1950s.
Absolutely.
But in a delusion or a deeply ingrained hallucination, Your brain just drops you into the middle of the scene.
And the fact that Teddy doesn't question this bizarre logistical gap is our first major clue that his reality testing is severely compromised.
That is such a good point.
And the physical anomalies just keep piling up. Right after they meet, Teddy reaches into his pockets to find his cigarettes.
He's a smoker.
Clearly a heavy one given the era and his stress levels. But he doesn't have any. He pats himself down, looking totally confused.
So Chuck steps in.
Right. Chuck, this guy he literally just met 30 seconds ago, pulls out a pack, hands Teddy a cigarette, and then this is the crucial part. Chuck lights it for him.
The lighting of that cigarette is such a specific, intentional action to include.
It really is.
It establishes a dynamic of dependency that is cleverly disguised as buddy cop camaraderie.
But wait, it gets better. The biggest visual anomaly of the opening is Teddy's wardrobe.
Oh, the suit.
Look at his suit.
Yeah.
It is comically oversized. It is baggy, the shoulders slump, it's draped over him like a child wearing his father's clothes.
It borders on clownish, honestly.
It really does.
Yeah.
Now, compare that to Chuck, who is standing right next to him in a perfectly tailored razor-sharp suit.
Very dapper.
Later, we meet the head of the hospital, Dr. Cawley, who is also wearing an immaculately tailored suit. Everyone in a position of authority has clothing that fits their identity perfectly.
And Teddy looks like he's wearing a borrowed costume.
Exactly.
And that is precisely what it is. When we synthesize these opening details, the illogical meeting point, the lack of matches, the oversized suit, a terrifying realization hits.
It changes everything you're looking at.
This is the absolute genius of the setup. Teddy isn't a U.S. Marshal arriving at an island to conduct an investigation.
No, he's not.
He's an inmate being brought back into his delusion.
Wow. Think about the mechanics of a high-security psychiatric facility in the 1950s.
Right, the baggy suit. That is standard issue, borrowed clothing.
When you are committed, your personal belongings, including your clothes, are confiscated.
You are given whatever generic hospital clothing is available, which rarely fits. That strips you of your identity.
And the cigarettes?
He has no matches, no lighter, and no cigarettes of his own because he is a patient in a ward for the criminally insane.
Patients are strictly forbidden from having fire.
Exactly. They aren't allowed anything that could be a hazard to themselves or the staff.
Which completely explains Chuck lighting the cigarette.
Chuck isn't a federal marshal. Chuck is a psychiatrist who has been assigned to play along with this fantasy.
That is why Chuck has the cigarettes, and that is why Chuck controls the fire. He is supervising a highly dangerous patient.
It is hiding in plain sight.
And the movie practically screams this at you when they actually arrive at the gates.
Oh, the holster scene.
Yes. They get off the ferry, meet the deputy warden, and approach the massive, heavily fortified, electrified gates of the prison compound.
The guards demand that the marshals surrender their firearms.
Standard protocol. Teddy plays the tough guy, complains about it, but expertly unclips his holster and hands us over.
Smooth, practiced movement.
Then we cut to Chuck. Chuck clumsily fumbles with his holster. He is struggling to figure out the clasp.
He is literally yanking at his belt.
And if you watch his eyes, Chuck looks over at Teddy for physical cues, watching how Teddy does it.
Chuck looks like a guy who has never unholstered a weapon in his entire life.
Because he hasn't. He's a medical professional.
Right. He spent his life in libraries, medical schools, and hospital wards, not at a firing range.
The fumbling isn't a continuity error or an actor missing his mark.
No, it is brilliant, intentional character work. Chuck is a doctor, awkwardly playing dress-up as a cop, and his lack of muscle memory betrays him instantly.
But hold on, I have to push back here.
Okay, go for it.
Because if this is true, if Teddy is actually a highly dangerous, criminally insane inmate, why on earth are the heavily armed guards letting him walk around freely?
That is the million-dollar question.
When Teddy arrives, the guards look at him from head to toe with absolute dread.
They are standing at strict attention.
Their rifles are cocked, their grips are tight. There is palpable sweating fear in the air.
They can feel the tension.
If they know he's a delusional murderer, how deep does this charade go? Why would the warden let him off the leash? It seems wildly irresponsible.
It is wildly irresponsible, and that is the crucial friction of the entire narrative.
It really speaks to the incredible danger of what the hospital administration is attempting.
The guards are terrified because they know exactly who he really is.
They know he is a highly trained former military man who is profoundly violent and entirely disconnected from reality.
The tension you see in those guards isn't respect for a visiting federal agent.
No way.
It is the raw, primal terror of being in the presence of an unpredictable apex predator who has been temporarily let out of his cage.
They have their fingers hovering over the trigger.
Because they know that at any second, the psychological investigation could shatter, he could snap, and people could die.
It really makes you think about our own perception as an audience. I want you to think about how often your own brain fills in the gaps of a story.
Constantly. We watch that opening scene, and because the movie's marketing and the musical score tell us this is a hero marshal,
We ignore the baggy suit.
we ignore the fumbling partner.
We ignore the completely illogical meeting on a boat.
We ignore glaring logical inconsistencies just to maintain a narrative we want to believe. We are doing exactly what Teddy's brain is doing.
We become utterly complicit in his delusion.
We accept the flawed data because challenging it would mean the entire reality of the story collapses.
Cognitive dissonance.
Right. Holding two conflicting pieces of information in your mind at the same time is incredibly uncomfortable. So our brains just smooth over the glitches.
Scorsese is using the language of cinema to force the audience to experience the exact same cognitive failures as a psychiatric patient.
Which brings us perfectly to the island itself.
Yes. We need to look at the ecosystem of Asher Cliff Hospital. The geography here is vital.
The hospital is divided into three distinct areas.
You have Ward A for the male patients, Ward B for the female patients, and then you have the ominous, heavily fortified Ward C up on the hill.
Housed in an old Civil War fort.
It is reserved for the absolute worst of the worst, the most dangerous, violent, and hopeless cases. You need special clearance and multiple escorts just to get near the door.
It's a geographical representation of the descent into madness.
Ward C is the abyss.
It's the physical manifestation of the deepest, darkest recesses of the human subconscious, where the most severe trauma is locked away.
Exactly. Now, into this highly structured ecosystem, Teddy brings his investigation. He believes he is looking for a missing patient named Rachel Solando.
A woman who supposedly drowned her 3 children and vanished from a locked room.
But as Teddy navigates the island, he meets the man actually running it, Dr. Cawley, the head psychiatrist, and we hear constantly about Dr. Sheehan, Rachel's missing primary doctor.
Cawley is trying to pioneer a radical, extreme, experimental psychiatric method here.
It's what we can call the role play treatment.
What's fascinating here is to really grasp why this treatment is so radical and why the guards are so furious about it, we have to spend some time looking at the historical context of psychiatry in the mid-20th century.
Because it's 1954.
Right. Psychiatry at this time was a brutal ideological battleground. On one side, you had what we could call the old-school barbaric methods.
These were physical, often violent interventions.
Extremely violent.
You're talking about things like trepanation, right?
Yes, drilling literal holes into the skull.
Ugh, that's horrifying.
The theory, which dated back centuries, was that mental illness was caused by pressure in the brain, or, in older terms, demons that needed a physical exit wound.
But even in the 40s and 50s, the physical therapies were heroin.
You had hydrotherapy. Now, today, hydrotherapy sounds like a spa day.
Right, like sitting in a hot tub.
But in a 1950s asylum, it meant wrapping a manic patient in canvas sheets soaked in freezing ice water to shock their nervous system into submission.
Or submerging them in a tub of water for hours on end until their body temperature plummeted and they simply lacked the physical energy to fight back.
That sounds like actual torture.
It was heavily debated even then. And of course, the crown jewel of the old school was the surgical lobotomy.
The transorbital lobotomy.
Popularized by Walter Freeman in the U.S. It involved taking a device similar to an ice pick, driving it through the thin bone at the back of the eye socket,
Right above the eye.
and sweeping it back and forth. The goal was to sever the white matter connecting the prefrontal cortex, which is the seat of complex thought, personality, and emotion, from the thalamus.
So you're literally disconnecting the emotional processing center from the rest of the brain.
You're turning a violently mentally ill person into a docile, emotionless zombie just to make them easier to manage.
Precisely. It was a surgical solution to a behavioral problem. You destroy the personality to eliminate the violence. That was the old guard.
And then, rising up to challenge them, you had the new school.
Which was the dawn of heavy pharmacology. Drugs like Thorazine were just entering the market in the early 1950s.
This was seen as a miracle because it didn't involve an ice pick.
But in practice, it was just a chemical straitjacket. You medicated the patients into a profound stupor so they would sit quietly in the hallways and stop being a burden on the staff.
So the choice was basically, we carve out your brain with a spike, or we drug you until you can't form a sentence.
That is incredibly bleak.
Where does Dr. Cawley fit into this nightmare?
Dr. Cawley represents a third, highly experimental and deeply controversial path. He is a humanist.
He believes in radical empathy and psychological indulgence.
He vehemently opposes the ice pick and the chemical straitjacket. He believes that inside every delusional patient is a sane person desperately trying to wake up.
So his theory is this: if you completely indulge a patient's delusion,
If you let them play out their elaborate fantasy to its absolute logical conclusion without resisting them.
the fantasy will eventually break under its own illogical weight.
It's like software testing.
Wait, what do you mean by that? Like a sandbox environment?
Exactly like a sandbox environment in computer programming. When you have a dangerous piece of malware, you don't run it on your main computer.
Right.
You create a secure, isolated sandbox, and you let the virus run its full execution sequence to see exactly what it does so you can understand how to dismantle it.
And Cawley has turned the entire island of Ashcliffe into a psychological sandbox for Teddy.
He wants Teddy to play the heroic detective, investigate the clues, and run the virus of his delusion until he hits a dead end and is forced to confront the painful reality he is hiding from.
That makes perfect sense of the environment.
Yeah.
It explains why it feels like a massive, incredibly dangerous theatrical production.
And the physical clues that this is a staged production are everywhere once you know to look for them.
Let me guide you through what Teddy sees as he walks around,
Mm-hmm.
and what we should be seeing as the audience. First, as Teddy walks through the grounds, the patients aren't acting like strangers looking at a visiting federal agent.
They greet him familiarly.
There's an old woman tending to the gardens with a terrifying jagged scar across her neck. She looks right at Teddy, puts her finger to her lips, and shushes him.
She is acknowledging the performance.
She knows he's an inmate just like her.
It's a wink from the chorus to the lead actor on stage. She's keeping the secret.
And then, look at the grand search for the missing patient, Rachel Solando. Teddy and Chuck join the warden and the guards to search the treacherous, rocky coastline.
Teddy is operating with extreme urgency.
A dangerous, highly capable child murderer is loose on an island during a storm. But what is actually happening in the frame?
The guards are completely apathetic.
They are literally lounging around on the rocks, smoking.
They aren't looking in crevices. They aren't fanning out.
Back at the facility, the nurses aren't panicked either. They're sitting around the desk doing their nails and chatting.
What's fascinating here is how this apathy reveals the structural brilliance.
This isn't bad acting by background extras.
No, it is meticulous direction. The entire island, every guard, every nurse, every groundskeeper, every patient has been ordered by Dr. Cawley to participate in this grand role play.
The guards are lounging around during a manhunt because they know they are looking for a ghost.
They know Rachel Solando didn't escape because Rachel Solando doesn't exist.
She is a phantom created for the game.
The guards are just killing time, waiting for the detective to finish his scene so they can go to lunch.
It really hits you over the head during the interrogations. Teddy sits down to interview the other patients in Ward A about Rachel.
He interviews a woman who murdered her husband with an axe.
A terrifying, presumably hardened person. But during the interview, she is incredibly nervous. And she isn't looking at Teddy.
If you watch her eyes, she constantly shifts her gaze over to check Chuck's reactions.
She is looking at Teddy's partner for approval before she answers Teddy's questions.
Because Chuck is Dr. Sheehan.
Yes.
He is the primary psychiatrist for the island. He is a figure of immense authority, power, and medical control to these patients.
This axe murderer isn't giving a police statement.
She is reciting lines that she has been forced to memorize by the hospital administration to humor another patient.
She is terrified of messing up her lines in front of the head doctor.
She is looking to Chuck to see if she is doing a good job in the play.
It is mind-blowing when you piece it together. But Teddy doesn't piece it together.
He can.
His brain is fighting so hard to maintain his reality as a U.S. Marshal. His ego is so invested in this heroic persona that when the cracks start to show, his mind actually starts to fracture.
He starts experiencing literal physical glitches in his perception.
And this brings us to one of the most brilliant visual language systems I have ever seen in a film.
The elemental symbolism.
The battle between the elements.
Yes. There is a visual dichotomy that dictates every single frame of this story. Fire versus water.
Let's unpack the element of fire first. In Teddy's world, fire is the ultimate hallucination.
Fire is the architect of his delusion.
He believes his wife, Dolores, died in a tragic apartment fire while he was away at work.
He believes that fire was set by a maniacal, faceless arsonist named Andrew Laeddis.
Every single time fire appears in the narrative, every time Teddy strikes a match in a dark hallway, every time he has a vivid vision of his burning apartment, every time he sits by a crackling fire in a cave,
It is a glaring hallmark that Teddy's brain is lying to him.
fire provides illumination, but in Teddy's case, it illuminates a totally false narrative.
Fire provides warmth, and the delusion he has built for himself is warm, heroic, and comforting compared to the unbearable truth.
Fire is the mechanism of his denial.
It consumes the harsh truth and leaves only ash, which his mind can then shape into whatever story he needs to survive the trauma. Fire equals falsehood.
Contrast that with the element of water. If fire is the lie, water represents the harsh, freezing, inescapable truth.
Look at the very first scene. Teddy is surrounded by water on the ferry, and it makes him violently ill.
His body is physically rejecting the element of truth.
Later, when he is having a deep hallucination while asleep, water drips on him from a leaky ceiling to literally shock him awake.
And as we learn later, the ultimate unbearable tragedy of his life didn't happen in an apartment fire.
It happened in the water.
It happened in a lake. Water is the reality he is drowning in.
It is a phenomenal externalization of cognitive dissonance. The clash between the comforting warmth of the fire, the lie that his wife died in an accident caused by an evil arsonist, and the suffocating, freezing reality of the water, the truth of what actually happened to his children.
His brain is constantly ping-ponging between these two elements, desperately trying to stay close to the fire.
And because his brain is under such immense processing stress, trying to render this false reality over the top of the real world, his perception starts to visually break down.
I have to take you back to that interrogation with the axe murderer. This is an incredible hidden detail.
Oh, this scene is so good.
During the interview, the woman gets anxious and asks for a glass of water. Chuck, playing the good cop, walks over to the water cooler, fills a glass, and hands it to her.
She takes the glass, she brings it to her lips.
She mimics drinking from it, but her hand is completely empty.
It's an astonishing moment of filmmaking.
There is no glass. Her fingers are curled around empty air. She is pantomiming drinking.
She lowers her empty hand, the camera cuts to a different angle, and in the very next frame, she's putting a half-empty glass of water down on the table with a clink.
The glass magically appears out of nowhere. And that's not the only glitch.
Later, when Teddy sneaks into Ward C, he talks to an inmate named George Noyce.
In one shot, George's hand is resting on the side of his head.
The camera angle changes, and instantly, in the span of a millisecond, his hand is resting down by his thigh.
It teleports.
These are not continuity errors. Martin Scorsese is one of the most meticulous, detail-oriented directors in cinema history.
He doesn't accidentally forget to give an actor a prop in a medium close-up.
Nor does he miss a glaring continuity jump with an actor's hand. These visual anomalies, the missing glasses, the teleporting hands, are literal representations of Teddy's fractured mind struggling to render reality.
I always think of it like a computer that's running out of RAM. You open too many heavy applications, the graphics card gets overloaded, and the textures in the video game start glitching out.
That is the perfect analogy. The delusion of being U.S. Marshal Teddy Daniels takes up so much cognitive processing power, so much psychological RAM, that his brain simply fails to render the minor details of the physical world.
But the missing glass of water is particularly poignant.
Remember our elemental rule: water is the truth.
The axe murderess asks for the truth. Teddy's brain literally cannot process the image of someone consuming the truth in front of him, so it triggers a psychological scotoma, a mental blind spot.
His brain entirely edits the water out of reality for a split second to protect the narrative. It censors the visual input.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the narrative Teddy is burning all this RAM to protect is entirely built around specific names and identities.
Teddy claims he is on a hunt for Rachel Solando, the missing child killer.
But he confides in Chuck that he is also harboring a secret, unsanctioned personal mission.
He is looking for a man named Andrew Laeddis, the arsonist who supposedly killed his wife.
And to complicate things further, he is looking for an unnamed ghost on the island, someone he calls Patient 67.
Teddy finds a cryptic note hidden in Rachel Solando's room.
It's written on a scrap of paper. The Law of Four, who is 67.
The Law of Four. This is the keystone of the entire architectural masterpiece we are discussing. Everything rests on this phrase.
So to find the truth, Teddy decides he must descend into the belly of the beast. He sneaks into Ward C.
The island is currently being battered by a massive Category 5 hurricane.
The power is out. Ward C is dark, damaged, flooded. a place of pure Gothic horror.
He is creeping around the cells with only the light of his matches. Again, fire, meaning his delusion is highly active in the space.
And he finds a prisoner locked in a dark cell. It's a man named George Noyce.
George is in horrific shape.
His face is beaten to an absolute pulp. It's heavily scarred, bruised, practically unrecognizable.
Teddy tries to whisper to him about the government conspiracy, but George looks at Teddy with a mix of terror and furious anger and says, "You did this to me."
George warns Teddy that everything happening on the island is a grand game, a game designed specifically, exclusively, for him.
George is desperately trying to shatter the glass. He is trying to force Teddy to look at his own reflection.
Because George knows exactly who Teddy is.
And that reflection is hidden in that cryptic note, the Law of Four.
I want you to listen to these names very carefully. First, we have our hero, Edward Daniels.
If you take the name Edward Daniels and you rearrange every single letter, you get an exact anagram for Andrew Laetus.
Then we have the missing patient, Rachel Solando.
If you rearrange the letters in Rachel Solando, you get Dolores Chanel.
It is a breathtaking revelation of psychological defense mechanisms. Teddy Daniels is Andrew Laetus.
They are the exact same person.
And Rachel Solando, the fictional child murderer who drowned her kids, is an anagram of Dolores Chanel, the maiden name of his actual dead wife.
He is patient 67. The math works out perfectly. There are 42 patients housed in Ward A and 24 patients in Ward B. That makes 66.
Teddy, or rather Andrew Laetus, is the highly dangerous 67th patient housed in Ward C.
He literally fabricated an entire alternate reality using the exact same letters of his tragedy.
Because the mind cannot create an entire universe out of absolutely nothing.
In a fugue state, in a deep dissociative delusion, the brain requires raw materials to construct the fantasy. It's a principle of the conservation of energy.
Andrew Laetus could not live with the guilt of who he was, so he scrambled his own name.
He scrambled his wife's name.
He created an anagrammatic fantasy to distance himself from his own identity, utilizing existing neural pathways to build the lie.
And this perfectly explains the horrific violence inflicted on George Noyce in Ward C.
Right, why did Teddy beat George so badly?
George knew Teddy in the real world before the delusion fully took hold. George made the fatal mistake of calling him by his real name.
He called him Laetus.
Wow. So Teddy beat a man within an inch of his life just to silence the truth, to protect the anagram.
Yes, it proves how deeply and violently he will protect his delusion.
The delusion is a fragile eggshell. It is the only thing keeping him from plunging into suicidal despair.
And if anyone tries to crack that eggshell, if anyone threatens the persona of Teddy Daniels, he responds with lethal, uncontrollable force.
But I have to ask, if the brain is working this hard to protect the eggshell, if he is actively hiding from the truth, and if he is willing to beat a man's face in just to avoid hearing his real name, why does his subconscious leave him breadcrumbs?
Why write the anagrams down on a piece of paper in the first place?
Why leave a note that says the Law of Four?
Why is his brain handing him the key to the very cage he intentionally locked himself in?
Because that is the profound inherent tragedy of the human condition. Deep down, no matter how severe the trauma, a part of the human psyche always craves the truth.
It yearns for reality.
Think of the subconscious as a massive, dark ocean, and the delusion is just a small, fragile boat floating on top. The ocean knows exactly what is underneath.
The subconscious leaves those breadcrumbs because the cognitive effort of maintaining the lie, constantly editing out glasses of water, scrambling names, repressing memories, is exhausting.
The part of him knows he is sick. A part of him desperately wants to be cured and find peace.
The anagrams are a cry for help from the buried, sane part of Andrew Laetus's mind, begging the detective persona of Teddy Daniels to solve the ultimate case, the mystery of his own identity.
That is so incredibly haunting. His inner detective is being hired by his own repressed trauma.
But Teddy isn't ready to solve it yet. When the truth gets too close, when George Noyce explicitly tells him it's all a game designed for him, Teddy's brain immediately throws up a massive defensive shield to deflect the realization.
And that shield comes in the form of a grand, terrifying conspiracy theory.
Paranoia as a defense mechanism. It's a classic psychiatric pivot.
Exactly. Teddy formulates an alternate theory for why nothing on the island makes sense. He becomes convinced that Ashcliff isn't a hospital at all. It is a covert, nefarious government facility funded by the House Un-American Activities Committee.
He believes they're conducting illegal, non-consensual transorbital lobotomies on political prisoners.
He believes they're taking sane people, going up through the eye socket with an ice pick, severing the frontal lobe, and creating an army of emotionless, pain-proof zombie soldiers to fight in the Cold War.
It is textbook projection. Teddy feels he is losing his mind. He feels his memory glitching. He feels his agency slipping away. So he projects that internal loss of control onto an external, malevolent force.
Think about how often you might do this in your own life on a micro scale. You have a terrible day, you're stressed, you make a few mistakes at work, and suddenly you convince yourself your boss is actively out to get you and plotting to fire you?
Your brain invents a conspiracy to justify why you feel anxious, rather than admitting you are the source of the failure.
Now, magnify that by 1,000,000. If the government is performing demonic mind control, then Teddy's confusion isn't his fault.
He isn't crazy. He's the righteous victim of a massive, sinister plot.
And to prove this zombie soldier theory, Teddy decides he needs to reach the lighthouse, which sits on an isolated rocky outcrop past the cliffs.
He believes the lighthouse is the center of these surgical operations. But a delusion built on paranoia demands a villain, and it demands validation.
So while climbing the treacherous rocky cliffs near the ocean, surrounded by water, reality, and danger, he discovers a small cave hidden in the cliff face.
He crawls inside and he finds a woman. She is huddled around a small fire holding a knife, and she introduces herself as the real Rachel Solando.
Not the patient who escaped, but a former esteemed doctor at the hospital who discovered the mind control conspiracy and was declared insane to silence her.
And she validates every single one of his paranoid fears.
She tells him exactly what he wants to hear.
She confirms the Nazi-style experiments. She confirms the creation of zombie soldiers. She even tells him that the aspirin and food he's been taking since he arrived have been heavily laced with neuroleptic hallucinogens.
Which perfectly explains his migraines, his hand tremors, and his vivid dreams.
She tells him that because he's a U.S. Marshal asking too many questions, they're going to trap him on the island, declare him insane, and lobotomize him too.
It is the ultimate vindication for Teddy. He was right all along.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the environmental clue you just mentioned.
The fire.
The fire in the cave. This entire conversation, this incredibly validating, deeply terrifying revelation, is a pure, unadulterated hallucination.
The real Dr. Rachel Solando in the cave does not exist. She is a manifestation of his own confirmation bias.
The fire is the tell. It tells us it's a lie.
Precisely.
No.
Because the water, the reality of what he has done, the ocean raging outside the cave is getting far too close to the surface. His mind invents a fake doctor, puts her by a fake fire in a fake cave to feed his conspiracy theory.
It justifies his paranoia. But more importantly, it casts him in the exact role he desperately needs to play. The heroic investigator, the righteous victim, the lone wolf fighting a corrupt system.
It is so much easier for his ego to believe he is the target of a demonic government mind control plot than it is to admit he is a monster who failed to save his own family.
The conspiracy theory is the ultimate safe space for his ego.
But the safe space can't last forever. The storm eventually breaks. The illusion starts to crumble under the weight of Colley's experiment.
Teddy, fully believing he is walking into a horrific surgical torture chamber, swims across the freezing water, literally submerging himself in the harsh, cold reality, and storms the lighthouse.
He kicks in the door, holding his gun, ready to face the architects of the conspiracy, ready to save the day.
He climbs the spiraling stairs, he bursts into the top room, but there are no surgical tables.
There are no ice picks. There are no zombie soldiers.
There is just a wooden desk, a chair, and Dr. Colley waiting for him calmly. And Dr. Colley finally pulls back the curtain.
He reveals the truth.
He tells Teddy that he is Andrew Laeddis. He is patient 67. He explains that Teddy has been a patient here for 2 years, that he is highly dangerous, and that the entire island has been role-playing his delusion for 2 days as a last-ditch effort to save him from a lobotomy.
Teddy tries to shoot Colley in a rage, but he realizes his gun, his ultimate symbol of federal authority and masculine power, is a plastic toy.
It breaks in his hands.
And then the door opens, and Chuck enters. But he's not wearing the oversized suit or the borrowed clothes anymore.
He is wearing his sharp, tailored suit. He reveals himself officially as Dr. Sheehan, Teddy's primary psychiatrist for the last 2 years.
The sandbox experiment has concluded. The role play is over, the stage lights are off, and now the doctors must force him to look at the actual script of his life.
And the script is brutal. Dr. Colley wheels out a whiteboard and writes out the anagrams. He forces Teddy to look at the math. He forces him to remember.
And the memory is devastating. Andrew Laeddis was a U.S. Marshal, yes. He was a veteran who saw horrific things in World War II.
He participated in the liberation of the Dachau concentration camp. He saw frozen bodies stacked like cordwood in the snow. He saw guards executed.
He came home profoundly traumatized and turned to heavy alcohol abuse to cope with the nightmares.
But his wife, Dolores, the woman whose anagram is Rachel Solando, was deeply, profoundly mentally ill. She suffered from severe manic depressive psychosis.
She told Andrew repeatedly that there was a bug in her brain that was clicking and humming, driving her mad.
She deliberately set fire to their city apartment as a cry for help, a blatant suicide attempt. But Andrew, drowning in his own trauma and alcohol, ignored it.
He packed them up and moved them to a rustic house by a lake, thinking fresh air and a change of scenery would cure severe psychiatric illness.
He actively chose to look the other way.
He chose the warmth of denial over the freezing cold water of medical intervention. He refused to see the reality of her sickness because it was inconvenient and painful.
Until the day he came home from work. He walked into the house, and it was quiet. He walked out to the lake behind their property.
And his wife, Dolores, was sitting on the dock, soaking wet, acting strangely serene.
He asks where the kids are. She smiles and says they are in school. It's a Saturday. Andrew walks to the water's edge, looks down, and he sees them.
His 3 young children, floating face down in the lake. She had drowned them all, one by one.
In a moment of pure, agonizing grief, he wades into the water and pulls their little bodies out, laying them on the grass.
And his wife, completely untethered from reality, asks him if they can sit them at the table, dry them off, and have a picnic.
The sheer weight of this trauma, the sudden horrific realization that his negligence and his drinking allowed this to happen, completely breaks his psyche.
In a fugue of despair and rage, he shoots his wife in the stomach, killing her.
That layered trauma, the drowning of his children, the murder of his wife, the crushing guilt of his own inaction, caused his mind to completely snap.
Andrew Laeddis died in that moment on the grass, and the heroic persona of Teddy Daniels, the marshal whose wife died in an accidental fire set by a bad man, was born.
It is a tragedy of almost Shakespearean proportions.
The trauma is so dense it creates a singularity in his mind. The role-play treatment, the elaborate play Dr. Cawley staged, was designed to bring him exactly to this point of realization.
Cawley and Sheehan walked him through his own maze, humored every paranoid tangent so he could finally see the exit door himself.
And in the lighthouse, it seems to miraculously work. Teddy finally breaks down, the delusion shatters.
He accepts reality. He admits his name is Andrew Laeddis. He admits he shot his wife. He admits his children are dead. He cries.
The doctors are incredibly relieved. The radical empathy experiment worked. He is cured. The lobotomy is off the table.
But the next morning, we get the final scene. Andrew is sitting quietly on the steps of the hospital grounds with Dr. Sheehan.
They are smoking a cigarette.
Andrew turns to Sheehan, looks him in the eye, and calls him Chuck.
He starts talking in an urgent whisper about how they need to figure out a way to get off the rock, that the conspiracy is too big, that they need to expose the government experiments to the press.
Dr. Sheehan's face falls. He looks over at Dr. Cawley standing in the distance and gives a small, heartbreaking shake of his head. A look of total defeat.
The delusion has returned. The roleplay failed.
Dr. Cawley signals to the wardens. The order is given. They're going to take him away and perform the transorbital lobotomy.
But this is where the absolute genius of the film crystallizes. This is where the structural masterpiece completes itself.
Because before he stands up to walk away with the orderlies, Andrew turns back to Dr. Sheehan, and he delivers the film's final, devastating line. Which would be worse, to live as a monster or to die as a good man?
This raises an important question, the most important philosophical question of the entire narrative, because if we analyze the psychology of that sentence, that is not the sentence of a delusional man.
That is a highly lucid, philosophical, incredibly self-aware observation.
You're saying she didn't relapse.
He didn't relapse at all. The radical treatment was a complete success.
In that final morning on the steps, Andrew Laeddis is completely cured. He is fully sane.
He remembers everything. He knows Chuck is Dr. Sheehan. He knows he killed his wife. He knows his children are dead.
But the grief, the crushing, infinite guilt of being the monster who ignored his wife's illness, the monster who drank while his family fell apart, the monster who ultimately pulled the trigger and killed the woman he loved, it was simply too much to bear.
Sanity was unlivable.
Reality was a torture chamber far worse than any ice pick. So he faked the relapse. He intentionally looked at Sheehan and called him Chuck.
He intentionally fed them the conspiracy theory one last time.
knowing exactly what the medical consequence of that relapse would be?
He chose a lobotomy.
A transorbital lobotomy destroys the personality, the memories, the emotional capacity to feel guilt or pain. It is, for all intents and purposes, a suicide of the mind.
He chose to destroy his own brain, to die as a good man, the heroic, dutiful, martial Teddy Daniels, rather than live another conscious day as the monster Andrew Laeddis.
He orchestrated his own execution.
It completely transforms the movie. It's not a thriller about a guy who realizes he's crazy.
It is a profound, heart-wrenching psychological tragedy about a man who realizes he is sane and decides he cannot survive the weight of it.
The twist isn't that he's a patient. The real twist is that he consciously chooses to be lobotomized.
It recontextualizes every single moment of the narrative. The entire movie is a man fighting a violent war against his own memory, and in the end, when he finally wins the war and reclaims his mind, he realizes the prize is a burning city.
So he chooses to burn the map.
I am absolutely blown away by the depth of this.
The way the breadcrumbs are laid out, the oversized suit, the fumbling of the gun, the missing glass of water, the teleporting hands, the anagrams, the constant battle between the fire and the water, it's all building to a singular, devastating choice.
We have taken an incredible journey through Scorsese's meticulously crafted puzzle box today.
I want to thank you, the listener, for diving so deep with us into the structural brilliance and the terrifying psychological depths of this story. So, what does this all mean for us?
It means that narrative is survival. It means the stories we tell ourselves, the little lies we construct every day, are sometimes the only things keeping us from falling into the abyss. We all curate our realities to protect our egos.
And it leaves you with a thought that I hope is going to linger long after this deep dive ends. Think about your own life.
If our minds possess the terrifying power to rewrite our own histories, to literally edit reality, to erase glasses of water from our vision, and invent entirely new identities just to protect us from pain.
How much of your own daily reality is objective truth? And how much is just the narrative you've built to survive?
It makes you wonder how many fires we light in our own lives just to avoid the cold water.
Muddy, freezing waters indeed. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. We'll catch you next time.